From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is Agday.
Coming up on Agday, the Trump administration not budging on tariffs.
The United States has been taken advantage of for decades and decades, and we can't do that anymore.
And now China is firing back.
This is a trade war, a classic trade war.
The pork industry feeling the pain of mounting pressure.
We're not just at the tip of the spear. The spear is in us, and there's blood on the floor.
Roller coaster markets continue.
Crop ratings were excellent, and that sent us into a long downtrend.
And it's not ice cream at this mobile business. Grab a filet or lobster from this parking lot shop.
Agday, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. How will markets react this week following the president's plan to put a 25% tariff on up to $50 billion of Chinese goods, a decision in response to alleged intellectual property theft by China. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer saying, quote, "Technology and innovation are America's greatest economic assets, and President Trump rightfully recognizes that if we want our country to have a prosperous future, we must take a stand now to uphold fair trade and protect American competitiveness." Lighthizer saying the U.S. will impose a first set of tariffs on 818 items worth about $34 billion on July 6th. Separate measures worth about $16 billion could take effect following a review and public comment process. The White House also saying it's planning broad investment restrictions for China. Those are set to be announced by the end of the month. Beijing firing back, announcing plans to slap its own 25% retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products. On the list, U.S. soybeans, beef, orange juice, and whiskey. Those are set to go into effect on July 6th as well. China imports roughly 60% of all U.S. soybean exports, and it's Beijing's promise to retaliate that had commodity markets nervous on Friday, grains dipping in early trade before recovering.
So this appears to me to be a very classic buy the rumor, sell the fact scenario. The rumor here, of course, was that Trump would impose tariffs. The fact is that, in fact, he did. And upon that fact, we saw the markets rebound. So have we totally priced in a trade war? It's tough to say because I don't think the story's over yet. China may come back with some sort of retaliatory tariff. Whether or not it involves soybeans, we do not know. We've got other trade issues as well. We've got issues with Mexico. We've got NAFTA issues that are ongoing. We've got issues with the EU. So this trade dispute is not resolved. But for the moment, I think the market is trading as if we've priced a great deal of this in.
Vaclavic says now that China has released its own set of retaliatory tariffs, markets could drop this week. China's Ministry of Commerce saying in recent weeks, the U.S. and China had made progress on a deal that involves additional purchases of U.S. ag goods. The Chinese say that offer is now invalid. The nonprofit group Farmers for Free Trade saying the administration's move to add additional tariffs on China is, quote, downright scary.
The farm community might be willing to take a black eye. They're not willing to take a broken arm. And it really comes down to how much damage is going to get done. And this is now real damage is being done to U.S. agriculture.
Keel says this situation is frightening for all U.S. farmers, and he believes this is a trade war. The ag industry banding together seeking help for these recent trade disputes. Soybean, corn, wheat growers, equipment manufacturers among those asking members of Congress for last-minute help to push back against the administration's plan to impose those tariffs. Meanwhile, the USDA saying it continues to talk about a stopgap program, money set aside to help producers hit by the tariff decision.
We continue to look for those opportunities down the road to understand how they've been impacted by these negotiations and if there's a role for USDA to play in working together with them. Both the Secretary and the President have said that they want to work to mitigate the impact that these negotiations have on agriculture.
And USDA is involved in those talks?
Yes, USDA is very much involved in those talks on a daily basis.
Meanwhile, closer to home, new reports Friday say Mexico mulling plans to hit the U.S. with more tariffs of their own. On top of the pork tariffs it's already put in place, this time Mexico's considering $4 billion in tariffs on corn, soybeans, and other items. Reuters reporting that Mexico's trying to find alternative suppliers, but Mexico's economy ministry would not confirm the new tariff targets. As I mentioned, Mexico already putting a 25% tariff on pork and pork products from the U.S. China has done the same. Betsy Gibbons spoke with pork producers last week about the problems building for the industry in 2018.
The future of the U.S. pork industry is getting mixed signals in mid-2018.
USDA has production pegged at about a 4.6% increase in 2018 from last year's record production.
New shackle space is coming online to help process those supplies. Economists say domestic consumption is good.
We have retail prices of pork that are actually up about 2% this year.
However, economists warn higher production costs and corn prices could add pressure to margins.
So we're looking at losses right now of about $11 per head on average. As we project out to 2019, that makes losses right now projected out around $14 per head of loss for farrow to finish average cost producers in 2019.
Those numbers do not include the trade tariffs and high uncertainty looming over the industry. Both China and Mexico now have tariffs on U.S. pork products after President Trump's announced tariffs on steel and aluminum. The EU and Canada are also promising to retaliate to some extent.
The United States has been taken advantage of for decades and decades, and we can't do that anymore.
The relationship between China and the U.S. is complicated. The administration focusing on the theft of intellectual property and decreasing a $375 billion trade deficit.
These issues in terms of intellectual property and discussions with China and steel problems, and these are structural problems in the steel and aluminum market, which is a separate issue. How is this all going to play out? Well, we don't know the answer to that. But we do know, I can tell you as a guy that's been working on these issues for 25 years in Washington, D.C., they needed to be addressed.
It's a message with mixed reactions in farm country.
Mexico's our largest volume market. China's a huge market, so it really hurts.
The pork industry first hit by China with 25% punitive tariffs. Then Mexico put 10% tariffs on pork, which escalates to 20% on July 5th.
We're not just at the tip of the spear. The spear is in us, and there's blood on the floor.
Some economists making their own projections of China's tariff impact to U.S. pork.
So to be conservative, I would say at least 1.1 billion, possibly more.
Hayes says when you add in Mexico,
China's 1.1 and Mexico is an additional 1.5.
But not all economists agree.
We weren't going to be selling very much to China this year anyway. They've got a lot of pigs, their prices are low.
Mexico, the largest market, is putting tariffs on pig shoulders and legs, but the U.S. can still sell pork to Mexico through an import quota.
They buy a huge amount of pork legs or hams. Probably 40 to 50% of what we produce here goes to Mexico, so it's a big deal. One of the questions that's come up is, are there alternative markets? On the shoulder side, there probably is. On the ham side, the fresh leg side, I'm not so sure about that one.
Trade frustrations and uncertainty pork producers hope will subside for the rest of 2018 and beyond. Reporting for Agday, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. There's still hope Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. can finalize a new NAFTA agreement. Canada's lead trade official saying NAFTA 2.0 talks will extend into summer. Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland making the statement following a meeting in Washington with U.S. administration officials. She stated that all three countries are making meaningful progress but need to keep working to get a deal completed on modernizing NAFTA. Meanwhile, USDA Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue meeting with his counterpart in Canada Friday, the bilateral meeting focusing on further cooperation between Canada and the U.S. regarding ag. Mike Hoffman is joining me this Monday morning. He has today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. Today's crop comment comes from Chris Elkins in Brownfield, Texas, near Lubbock. As of Friday, Chris says his area has received less than 2 inches of rain since September. Just west of him, they've accumulated even less than that. Hopefully the weather will change. There's rain in the forecast for this week. And taking a look at the drought monitor, you can see we are still very dry from northern Missouri, southern Iowa, all the way through the southwest and south Texas, but some of that area is going to get some rain. We'll show you that forecast coming up in a little while, but first here are some hometown temps.
Keeping track of the shifting market prices has never been so easy. Get the latest commodity prices sent directly to your cell phone with market updates. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
We've got the team gathered for a great conversation around markets and preparing for what could be another bumpy week of trade news. That's coming up. And if you have some older equipment sitting around your operation, Machinery Pete has an update on resale values. In agribusiness, Japan says it's halting purchases of Canadian wheat. That follows the discovery of unapproved GMO wheat in the western Canadian province of Alberta. Japan said it was suspending the tender and sale of Canadian wheat until officials can confirm that the Canadian wheat that Japan buys doesn't contain any GMO traits. Here at the Agribusiness Desk this week, we've got Craig Van Dyke with Top Third Ag and Brian Roach with Roach Ag Marketing. Thank you both for being here. All right, what did we watch last week? Anything that, other than trade, that is top of your list for how markets are going to go? Brian, we'll start with you.
Well, we triggered last Monday, I think the trade concern triggered the corn and soybean markets into reversals. Go back and look at the crop ratings. Crop ratings were excellent, and that sent us into a long downtrend that we're still in. And so the specs have long liquidation that we're seeing. I think what we're going to see here is we're going to see the specs in corn and soybeans go net short. They've done that over and over, and I think that from a farmer standpoint, we shouldn't be too shaken up on that because that's a normal pattern. And I think then it sets up, okay, for next week, once we get through this hot weather, there's some rains coming in, what do the extended maps look like, and then we'll begin to trade that. I think that's really where we're at. We're into watching the weather every day, and of course, what's going on with China and NAFTA, but I think that's where my focus will be.
What about you, Craig?
I think a lot of the conversation is going to be what's weather, what's going on with tariffs and so forth. In my opinion, what I'm watching after this big break now is price action.
Okay.
To me, that's the most important function of what's going on here. I always assume the market knows what's going on in general before I do. So in my opinion, the price action to me is going to help tell the story moving forward. And then we'll know, oh, the weather is shifting. Oh, the tariff storyline's changing. Oh, demand is shifting one way or the other. So, for me, after a big break like this, I want to see a market that can knock out all the weak hands on the other side and have a nicely higher close.
Yeah.
So for me, price action is going to be the most important function coming into the end of the month.
Are you finding any ways to be encouraged?
Well, we had a lot of selling opportunities before this big break. We had three good ones in corn and probably 3 or 4 in soybeans. I think from the grower side, there's been a lot of corn that's moved, a lot of corn that's hedged up, talking to a lot of elevators in the last 2 weeks. A lot of growers in some areas are further hedged now than they have been in past couple years. So I think that's very positive.
Okay.
And I think that the look forward on the fundamental side is still, even if we have big crops in the U.S., we still have a good winter and springtime to look at.
Okay, lots to watch. Craig, appreciate it. Thank you, Brian. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
To talk to an expert one-on-one, call Roach Ag Marketing, toll free at 800-622-7628. For a special report on the grain markets, call toll free at 877-TT-HEDGE. That's 877-884-3343.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Your meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, as we look at rainfall over the past week, you can see there are places that got some decent rainfall.
Right. Unfortunately, a lot of it's usually in areas that don't necessarily need it because they've been getting it. But nonetheless, that's the way it worked out. But the good news, as you'll see in my forecast, is that we're actually going to see a fair amount of moisture in a lot of these areas that have stayed dry. Now, you will notice the panhandle of Texas and some of the surrounding areas, there were pockets that got an inch over the last week. Other pockets didn't get anything. But you can see the heavier amounts a week ago Friday to this past, or Saturday, I should say, to this past Friday. You can see some of the heavier amounts, Central and South Florida, no longer worrying about any drought down there, and also panhandle of Florida, back to just east of New Orleans. Some of those areas had 3, 4, 5 inches of rain. Checking out farther north then, we remember those complexes. We had several days where complexes were forming southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, moving off to the southeast. Well, some of the heavier ones made it into Illinois, northwest Illinois, southeastern, south central Illinois, not quite into southern portions, and into west central and southwestern Indiana. Those areas ended up with 5, 6 inches of rain in some places. But the really dry areas, north central Missouri back into Kansas, didn't see a whole lot. So that's the way that works out. Here's the jet stream as we start the week. It is hot from the Great Lakes through Florida because of this big ridge. Now, this cutoff low in the southwest has been helping. It's pulled up the remnants of Bud. That came through the southwest. It's now kind of channeling into the northern plains and northern Great Lakes as we start the week. But as we head through the week, you will notice a trough begins to dig in. The heat starts to be shoved farther south in the Great Lakes and the Northeast by the middle of the week. And by the end of it, we're into a trough in the Northeast, and that will keep things cooler for the Great Lakes and the Northeast. Kind of a different scenario off to the west, as you can see there, with some troughs still developing, and that should continue the moisture into the southwest at least occasionally. So temperatures this week below normal in the southwest, Colorado southward, above normal then, southern Mississippi Valley into the southeast, northern Great Lakes and the west coast. And you can kind of see the above normal precipitation is kind of in those same areas. And then below normal farther north and west. 30-day outlook for temperatures above normal, a lot of the Corn Belt and the west, below normal southwest and the far northeast, and precipitation above normal southern Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast and also Four Corners southward. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Tucumcari, New Mexico, first of all, variably cloudy, slight chance of a shower, high temperature of 89 degrees. Rhinelander, Wisconsin, cooler with showers and a thunderstorm pretty likely, high of 73. And Florence, South Carolina, maybe a morning shower, then partly sunny, high 94.
Our good friend Machinery Pete stops by next.
Want to keep more money in your checking account, folks? One tip, take better care of your equipment. Stick around and I'll show you the proof.
And later, an online retailer takes to the streets for a personal touch. Machinery Pete says rough condition equipment is having a tough time at auction. Greg?
Well, of course, last week was a tough one with the markets. And people have been asking me, hey Pete, what's happened with used values? Well, what's happened is a continuation of a trend I saw beginning about 12 months ago. The rougher condition used equipment is getting softer. We actually saw proof of that last Thursday. We filmed a farm auction for our Machinery Pete TV show up in east central North Dakota. And the equipment on the sale was just kind of average, which is totally fine. I mean, we know that not everything is shiny and a record price, but all these years, it doesn't matter to us. We just want to compile the data, let you know what's happening in the market. So a couple of examples from the sale. Here's a picture of a 1995 Ford New Holland 8970. This thing had 8,755 hours on it, sold for $19,500. Now coming into the sale, the last 30 8970s I had seen sold at auction, average price $30,165. So it shows you the effect condition can have on sale price. Now another tractor on the sale last Thursday was this 1991 Ford Versatile 976. And this thing had just under 10,700 hours on it, sold for $14,750, and was purchased by a local jockey. Now the same auction firm, the Steffes Group, actually had another farm sale exactly 1 week earlier over in northwest Minnesota, and they sold another 976. And here's a picture of it. This thing was a 93 model, just over 9,800 hours on it, went for $23,500. So more concrete proof here, folks. Take great care of your equipment. It pays in the long run.
Up next, buying your beef from a parking lot truck. We'll tell you who's selling after the break.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M5 series, bringing new levels of comfort to hard work. Learn more at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
You remember the old ice cream truck or rural delivery folks that stop by every few weeks to sell some goods to the family, but would you buy your beef or seafood from a parking lot truck? Well, Amazon rolling out treasure trucks to various locations around the country. The ice cream truck style shop selling everything from beef to seafood, even electronics. The trucks debuted 2 years ago and now roam nearly 40 cities in the U.S. and England. Treasure truck sales are only a small part of the online giant's business, but it helps the company to see which products are hot sellers.
Well, they offer all sorts of different things. They've got products, you've got food, you've got There's been great deals on salmon and beef and burgers. And the prices are great. It's not that it's pretty convenient to just stop by and pick one up.
It's their way of getting buzz. It's their way of getting social media attention and getting people excited. It also drives frequency. It gets people to sign up for their email lists and be excited about Amazon.
Amazon picks what's sold on the trucks. They are holiday-related goods like chocolates and roses on Valentine's Day, trendy items, and food such as uncooked shrimp or raw chicken wings. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in, spent part of your day with us. For all of us here at Agday, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.